Hello, MB Poli World. Welcome back to another week. We are here in Mennequest in St. John, New Brunswick, on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoq, and the Paskatomiquotti. I am here joined by my lovely co-host, Joanna Killen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
As well as our recent and frequent guest, Shawn Rouse.
Hello, yes. Thanks for having me back.
Of course, we made it a mission. We want to go through all of the ridings we can, and hey, we've got some time to be able to do it before the October 21st, supposedly, most likely, election day. So, yeah, we're excited to have you back, Shawn, because we opened up some cans of worms last week. We had some great chats.
Yeah, absolutely. And it inspired me afterwards to just start digging through some of these writings and lining them up, knowing we were going to chat about them. So I think...
Yeah, we're going to have to share that map you made, Shawn.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I've been trying to document it all together so I could get it in, my own mind, how it all fits together. And yeah, I can definitely show that.
Yeah, that map looks great. I mean, if we can get to it this week, that is awesome. If not, just know, listeners, that Shawn is on an interactive sort of map that we'll be able to bring up here and click on a spot and be able to see who are the people that are running there. And we can start to, you know what, I would love it. I don't know how reasonable it is because everybody's busy, but I would love it if we can start to have our own takes on each by-election. And like, if three of us agree that it's leaning red, well, then it gets colored in a certain red. And if two of us are, one color and not, you know what I mean? Like kind of degrees. I've seen that on other, I don't know if it's Eric Grenier who does that, but, or Philip Fournier with Canada 338, but I've seen certain ones where it's like, there are certain ridings in the country where it's like NDP and Liberal and conservative toss up, and he's just got like the three colored stripes across the whole riding map so that it looks very clear that, hey, this is a toss up. That's something to shoot for. I don't know how crazy that would be to do.
Well, I think it's possible. I've seen some tools out there that can help us do that too. Just to, if we wanted to just sort of spitball what a election night could look like. There are tools out there that will just help us. Let's, select all these ridings and see what it looks like. So yeah, definitely.
That'd be so fun. I can't believe that it's coming up so quickly. Like it's less than 6 months now. And I know that there is, I think this was your tweet that said there are only 8 days of the legislature left.
Right. Yeah. So after this break, so right now they're on a break, so this week, and then next week they'll return. So the next sitting day is going to be, the 28th, and then they'll go all week until the 31st, and then the following week they're back. There's a standing committee on June 11th, but the only days the legislature will be in session will be up until June 7th, and then that's it. So whatever's going to happen legislation-wise, or there's any questions that they really want to nail the government on, they're going to be asked in the next 2 weeks. So it's must-see TV for poly nerds like me.
Absolutely.
It is wild that there is such little time spent at the legislature. Like that's always been so fascinating to me that they don't really spend a lot of time there when you look at the grand scheme of the calendar.
Oh, it was someone mentioned that this week on Twitter. It's like, what do these guys get paid for? They're never in the ledge. And Andre Anderson Mason jumped on the tweet and said, listen, it's 5:15. I've been meeting since 8:30 with people, and I still have more meetings going on. And, we don't just sit in the ledge. We work hard. And it's like, okay, good for you for sticking up for yourself. And
but I think that's optional, though, right? Like, it's great that she does that. But I don't think that if you want to be someone who avoids any of that work, no one's coming to knock on your door to say, hey, were you in meetings all day?
I'm going to guess that Blaine didn't do that this past week. Meet with constituents all day. I doubt it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, sort of
I
make
don't
your
think
own
so.
workload. I feel as an MLA,
Hmm.
there's no
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. So this week we got a good little lineup that I'm excited to get into. Shawn, you've mentioned a couple of ridings that we're going to touch on,
Hmm.
and that's good. Um, I thought it may be, I thought it may be a good place for us to start, just in the interaction of the federal realities. And in order to do that, I actually have a little picture that I want to bring up. And Joe, you're going to roll your eyes because you know how dangerous it can be to share pictures on here. Um, but I'm going to show just for
pause,
those. What's that?
pause.
Yeah, no, we're good. I'm going to pull it up
You
right
got
here.
this. You got this.
Um, so this is a little picture I'm looking at. I'm just going to zoom in for those of you who can't see. This is Eric Grenier's sort of if an election were held today, what would be, oh, sorry, let's go back. That was an article from this morning. There we go. If an election were held today, where would we be? It's really tiny, so I'm going to zoom in and then I'm going to try to scroll up here if I can. I think if I pull up, there we go. Can you guys all see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. So if an election were held today in New Brunswick, we are
Ooh.
looking at the Greens losing a seat, which is like so crazy to me. But hey, it's in there. Eric and Philip Fournier are behind the screen looking at this. But we're looking at the PCs losing 3 seats. We're looking at but there's also a few incumbent, like there's a few seats that they just don't have right now because people have stepped down too, right? But we're overall looking at Liberals having 24, the PCs having 23, and the Greens having 2, which puts the Greens in the position of a balance of power. Interesting situation here. There's 3 vacant seats. Currently, there's 1 independent. They are saying that Dominic Carty is either not going to run, or if he is going to run, he will not win. I'm not sure which Green Party representative they think is going to lose their seat, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was David Coon. Because he is sitting in a different riding, and I think it's a riding that we were going to chat about tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Shawn, was York one of the ones we were going to take a peek at?
York is one of them, yeah. And so we were talking about which ones have a full slate of candidates
Yeah,
nominated. So there's a few of them out there that we have to choose from. So right now we've got Rossay, Ormoc to Sunbury, Fredericton North, Fredericton, Sunbury, Fredericton York, and Carleton York all seem to. And when I say full slate, it'd be Conservative, Liberal, Green, which would be the top 3 parties. So there might be an NDP or a PANB that pops in there later on, but
right.
that's what we're calling a full slate for the purposes of this podcast.
So if you like that, you can go check out Eric Grenier's pod, and I thought this would be a great spot because if an election were held today nationally, he is saying the Conservatives would be taking, and this was a different picture, you couldn't see it in that one I showed, but he's saying the Liberals would be reduced to 54 seats from 156. The Conservatives would be improved to 227 seats, which is a vast majority, from 118. The Bloc would get 37. The NDP would get 23, which is down for them, and the Greens would keep 2 of their seats. And there would be there's currently 6 vacancies and some incumbencies, but we know that Toronto St. Paul is a by-election. It's going to get called federally. But what is the dovetailing of the federal election, the provincial election, how all this plays out isn't something we've spent a lot of time on here. So I thought maybe it would be a good chance for us just to go around the circle here and just chat about some of those interactions that we're seeing, things that we're paying attention to, that we're curious about how that will play out, and how our leaders, federal, like within the provincial parties, how they are showing up. And maybe if we can say one thing, what is a risk factor for each leader? When it comes to the federal things, because if you think about it, like the federal elections, the federal politics takes up a lot of airspace for people, even though the provincial politics impacts much more of our lives than the federal
Exactly.
politics do. And as municipal councillors, we love to say that, like,
It's true.
100% of the things we deal with at the municipal level impact you directly, everybody directly, because
Mhm.
everybody's got to walk on a sidewalk or drive on a street, and that's our domain, right? So, or needs sewage and water, and that's our domain, or needs the police or fire department to show up, and that's our domain. But
Exactly.
the further you
Yeah.
get away from municipal government, the less it impacts you. So the federal politics always takes up all that airspace. So,
And we've talked about this
yeah.
before. There's a lot of confusion around like people thinking the Liberal and the PCs are the same federally as they are provincially, and vice versa. So there's
Mhm.
the political educational level is low. So we're seeing it with Higgs bringing in Poilievre to support him in his efforts,
Right.
tying himself to that, and then Susan Holt sort of trying to break some of those ties with Trudeau. So they know it too, I'd say, in your for your precipice, for your thesis here.
Yeah.
On the importance of this. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, just kicking us off, I mean, I guess it's a year away, almost, or more, I guess, and anything could really happen between now and then. And there's going to be, I think there's not a lot of focus on it now, and it's probably not going to get a lot of focus from the mainstream voter until it gets pretty close to election time, whenever that is. And Trudeau will call it whenever it's most advantageous for him, which might never be apparent based on those polls. I mean, he's pretty far down, obviously, and and we've talked about this before. He's sort of a punchline or a meme with the right now, and he's been demonized in a way I can't remember seeing anyone demonized since maybe Mulrooney over the GST. I mean, it'd be going way back, and so he does have this, fringe, getting less fringe group that flies the F Trudeau flags on their trucks and hangs out on the side of the road and has a. Was it Steve Outhouse shared a picture of a guy with an axe attack sign on his lawn, and he had an axe in the top of the sign. And
Yes.
It's like, okay. I mean, I know a guy in Charlotte County who had a picture of Trudeau and his cube van that he had for his business. And he kept that, he drove that around far past the election time, just and it's, the 12 months after the election, he's still driving this around. You're thinking,
Mr. Hooper.
I wasn't going to call him out, but you know who I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about. I don't think anybody needs. We don't. I don't think we're hiding anything. If anybody's been around Charlotte County, we all know who had that. But it was right central to his business, right in the main street. Everybody knew who it was. It was insane.
Yeah, and parked right down by our family cottage there by Lake Utopia. Yeah, so I get to see it, drive by it quite a few times. So he's so I guess what I'm trying to say, there is this huge enterprise, but I probably gets more attention than is actually warranted, but very vocal group of people who are anti-Trudeau and who are very outspoken and spend a lot of time trolling online and trying to generate this this negative impression of Trudeau, and just absolutely in love with Poilievre, and they have apples beside their avatars because he ate an apple once on a camera, and it's very, I can't identify with a lot of that. There's as you said, it's from a federal perspective, it's too remote for me. It's not something that I find on a day-to-day that's tangible, that that you see every day, that you can get your head around in a real practical way, I guess, to your point. So I am interested, though, on how it is going to impact this upcoming provincial election, as you say. And Trudeau's here, And while not hugging Susan Holt, he definitely took a few shots at Blaine Higgs just last week, particularly on abortion and Policy 713. So just, again, using them sort of as wedge issues or reverse wedge issues. They're being used by Higgs and Outhouse as wedge issues. And, Trudeau took advantage of the opportunity to say, we're on the other side of that wedge. We're for more access, not less access to abortion. And, we're against what they're doing with Policy 713 and to trans kids in schools. So I think, again, it sort of depends on where you are on the political spectrum, how you interpret that. If it's Trudeau, I mean, that's just going to make you dig in your heels if you're on the right a little harder. And if you're a pro-Trudeau kind of person, you might perceive that positively and appreciate the support. And even though it wasn't explicit, that is similar to Susan Holt's and the Liberals and the Greens stances as well. So are we going to see more of that as the election gets closer? I'm not sure. Probably. I think so. It's going to be to Trudeau's advantage to get rid of the Higgs government. And I honestly think they don't agree with a lot of the stances they take, and they know that they have to get rid of some of these provincial governments, conservative governments across the country, if they want to sort of climb their way back to popular support. So I think he does have a vested interest in taking Blaine Higgs down a peg.
That makes sense. Joe, do you want to go next on that round?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Shawn, with this strategy, probably from the federal perspective of the advantage of getting more involved in some of these provincially driven issues that, they do throw a big chunk of money at from a federal, from the federal bank of tax fund. So really it's like, it's to their advantage. And with Trudeau staying out of it and just letting Poilievre come and have dinners all over the province and rallies with Higgs, it's really not a good look if he doesn't try to come and course correct some of that. But then again, there is such a hate on for Trudeau like we've never seen. I think you're right. Usually there's some, modicum of respect for prime ministers that is upheld. People were mad that we were calling Queen Victoria Vicky Day this year. So usually in Canada, there's this sort of level of respect that's held for these people in these positions. And that has completely gone out the window with Trudeau. So it's a delicate balancing act he has to play here. And I'm glad he is saying what he has said about 713 and about abortion, because that's been going on for what feels like ever, even though 713 stuff is just a year old now. But the abortion piece, we've been fighting that good fight for decades. So that it's Liberal and PC governments that have dropped the ball in the Morgentaler Clinic and various other attempts to provide broader access to abortion care services for women. So glad he's speaking up. Very glad. And I think Susan Holt and obviously the Greens too are all about trying to broaden access there. So really, thank you, Trudeau, for coming to say something. But it's will that hurt the Liberals, considering how badly this hate on is for him due to all these other issues around inflation and tax, and the general sentiment of the public seems to be that we're taxed to death, and even this Bank of Canada stuff is driving everyone's mortgages up and causing havoc left, right, and center. So it just feels like such a swamp of issues for the Liberals right now. And I personally would not want to be Susan, having to wade through it and try to, distance myself in some ways from the federal Liberals and then attach myself in others, because that feels like it has to be quite the dance, to be honest.
Yeah. And I do think to an extent it's true. I mean, there is a real separation. There is always common party workers between the federal and provincial parties. But, from a leadership perspective, there's not I mean, the provincial governments and federal governments always work together regardless of the party. It's both in their
Yes.
interest to come to agreements on funding arrangements, different projects, and the only time outside the legislature you see everyone come together is when they're cutting ribbons for these, developments. And, you'll
Yeah.
see a Green Party with a Liberal and a PC, and everybody gets in. There's federal guys and there's provincial guys, and everybody gets together for the picture no matter what. So they
Sure.
work it out when it comes to these public opportunities to show that they're doing their jobs. And I think that'll happen regardless of who's in the provincial government, who's in the federal government. I don't think we're ever going to be published. They'll always use it as an opportunity to either maintain or win back support.
It's true. You'll see Wayne and Higgs in like Wayne Long and Blaine Higgs in the same photos because there's so much bilateral funding that goes on.
Yep.
Yeah, and even though they'll literally throw shots at each other online very readily. So it's so funny you say that. And we've been in rooms with the premier as well, and thanks for the cash. Like just
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it was funny when Higgs went to that OGO committee to do the whole carbon tax presentation, and they brought in all the New Brunswick Liberals just to sort of pepper him with questions. So Wayne Long was there and Jenica Atwin was there, and both really impressive in performance on that committee day. I was really walked away, having really not been able to see them do any work besides, in the House of Commons, firsthand, just seeing them do some committee work and how well they know their files and holding people to account. It's really cool to see that firsthand. But they just went after Higgs, like, why are you here? We don't understand why you're here. Who invited you? And just really busting each other's chops. And Higgs was giving it right back just as hard. So it was fun to watch. It was a lot of politics, not a lot of substance, but sometimes that's entertaining for poly nerds.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's true.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I think, you make a good point, Joe, about how do you cozy up on one hand and then distance yourself on another. It's so visceral right now, the hatred of the Trudeau liberal brand, and it is liberal, right? It's not just Trudeau. Poilievre has made sure to tie Trudeau to every single liberal in this country, and he's put a lot of money behind doing it.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like it to me is like you have a collapsed conservative party here, and then you have this anvil that the Susan Holt New Brunswick Liberals have to carry. That's not their choosing, but technically, from a policy position, they would be far more aligned to Justin Trudeau's policies
Sure.
and some of his politics than they would be to Pierre Poilievre's. And so, when I hear, especially around this fight around a woman's right to choose, around access to abortion services, there is a vulnerability there, and I don't know how they can, on the one, like I guess it depends on how well Steve Outhouse is going to wedge. And if there's one thing I know about Steve Outhouse with the Progressive Conservatives, who's now a pig feeding from two troughs, he is on the one hand the campaign manager for the re-elect Blaine Higgs campaign, and on the other hand, he's getting taxpayers' money for being the chief of staff or what?
He's
Or
a
no,
secretary.
Principal secretary. So,
Thank
which
you.
is, I don't know. What do they do? Whatever Blaine wants, I guess.
It's a bureaucratic position that's associated with the public service, and the other
Right.
hand is a partisan position. Yet he maintains that he can open one eye and close the other at the same time, and rub his belly and scratch his head and tap his
Yeah.
rear end, and like
Go
I
ahead.
just anyway. So
They
this
went
guy,
out
but
of
he
their
wedges
way.
well. What I will
Yeah.
say is he wedges well. He wedged the out of Notley for the NDP in Alberta to get Danielle Smith, who was in the toilet for approval ratings. I thought they had that in the bag, but Danielle Smith, and this is where I got into a fight with certain conservatives this week online. I mean, got into a fight. I got into a debate, I guess, like Jordan Manzer, for example. And I just, he's like, oh, blah, 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 the conservatives and, the Holt liberals are like the Justin Trudeau liberals, and David Coon and the Greens don't have a chance in hell, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, you can hold up Danielle Smith and Ford all you want. And you can say to me, look, Danielle Smith had very low approval ratings, and so did Doug Ford. And that's true. But not one of them lost 12 MLAs out of 49. Like, we're talking about, nearly half, well, over half of your sitting MLAs are now not going to run for you. And half a dozen of them, almost, how many have stepped down completely and are no longer sitting? Is it 4? Or is it 3?
Well, I mean, if you look at Gary Crossman, for example, and Arlene Dunn, I mean, they just walked away, and then Trevor Holder walked away. I mean, these are guys who didn't even, they're not even sitting in the backbench to get paid. They have left their roles, so they just didn't even want to come to this session for whatever reason. I'm assuming they didn't have something else lined up. I think Gary is just going back to a quiet retirement and enjoying life. As for the other two, I'm not sure where they're going to land, but I'm assuming they didn't walk out of one job into another. They just made the call that they were sick of earning $90,000 a year sitting behind Blaine and propping up the government, and they decided, I'm done, and walked away. And that says something to me. I think if you can't, you see Ross Wetmore, for example, he sits back there, he shows up every day, he keeps his seat occupied, he doesn't read member statements, he doesn't do anything except for, sit there and vote for the government when appropriate. Yeah. And 99% of the time he votes with them, except for that one infamous time. And, Andrea Anderson Mason's the same way. She has no, I think they have committee assignments, but, in the legislature itself, they have been stripped of a lot of their roles that you'd see people do in the day-to-day sessions. They're not really the public face of the government anymore, I guess is what I'm noticing. Like Glenn Savoy and Bill Hogan and
they're
Mike Dawson. You'll see those guys. Ernie Steves. You'll see those. Bruce Fitch still is there. He hasn't walked away. Tammy Scott Wallace. They show up, they answer questions, they make statements, and, they go around and cut the ribbons, and they show up at these riding meetings. They are the, working around the clock, being the face of the government, and where you see some of these other folks just, hanging in the background, so to speak. But the ones that have walked away completely just couldn't take it anymore, presumably. And, if you talk to people who know them, that's what you hear is it's just I'm done, and I'm moving on to something different. It wasn't something I was interested in doing anymore.
Well, I know that Arlene Dunn, she's now the executive director of the New Brunswick Construction Association.
That's right.
She walked right out of one and into another. She's back representing.
Yes, she did.
Like the others.
And we were saying there's a major glow up there. Like, she just looks happier. She looks like she's doing work with purpose. And like, from what I see on Facebook about the initiative she's undertaking, she looks genuinely happy.
She is
doing work that's meaningful.
I've had to meet with her on some of this. I shouldn't say had to. I got to meet with her on some of these the housing pieces that I'm working on down here. And she certainly is. She's focused. She knows her stuff on it, and a very much better fit for. But I back to the Rob Ford and the Danielle Smith comparison, and Blaine's never had, or sorry, Rob and Danielle Smith never had the toilet kind of reality that Blaine does. You can't lose that much ground game in that many ridings with that many like legacy incumbents and it not matter. And
Right.
you're only, they were never ahead by much. And now they're behind by a lot as far as I'm concerned. So it is interesting because if you think of the federal government and the provincial government relationships, historically speaking, only one time in history, I'm quite sure of this, I will double check it and fact check myself next week if I'm incorrect, but only one time in history was the provincial government and the federal government aligned. Often for New Brunswick, the federal government is one party and the provincial government is the other party. Now,
Gallant was with Trudeau.
With an overlap for a year.
Yeah.
But they didn't get I think it's during this election period that I'm talking about when these overlap elections happen that you tend to vote for the opposite party. New Brunswick tends to vote for the opposite party that's in power at the provincial or federal level. So it'll be interesting to see if that stat can hold true. But there's definitely, like you say, been overlap moments where, because there's a year between the election of the federal and the provincial, there's some overlap. But so who knows what that means? But where they're vulnerable for sure is I do think it's that third party rise of the Greens. I don't see it coming from the People's Alliance or from the NDP. If Steve Outhouse wedges properly on things like this abortion issue, and you have Justin Trudeau over there in the corner of Susan Holt, with or without the hug you're talking about, Shawn, it's going to mean that this province, who are very many people adamantly anti-Trudeau, they're gonna notice that, and that's gonna mean something, and they're not gonna show up to vote, or they're gonna explore their options. And I don't know how that goes, because we just have such little data to go off of for polling that is substantive, and I don't know again why Philip Fournier and Eric Grenier are pulling out a Green seat here. I have a hard time seeing a scenario where the Greens don't pick up a seat or three. And I have a hard time seeing a scenario where the Conservatives don't lose a lot of seats, like 10 seats.
Wow.
But
so
it's not reflected yet.
So I've got two things on that, I guess. So the first one is just to chime. You're talking about Alberta and Ontario. Someone reached out to me on Twitter this week talking about Saskatchewan and Scott Moe.
Yep.
And as it turns out, we talked about 12 people walking away from Higgs, for different reasons. Some couldn't stand him anymore. Some just wanted to retire. But, all said and done, 12 or 13, I think it is now. Scott Moe, they've had the Saskatchewan Party for 17 years, according to this person. And he's now had 21 of his caucus say they're not going to run for him anymore. And the break point was in the next election that's coming this year.
Yeah.
Right. And the break point for him, again, was this Policy 713 thing, or their version of it. I don't know what it's called, but, it was a turning point for them as well. And what this person said to me was, it's not smart politics to go after kids. Everybody, either has one of these kids, LGBTQ kids, or knows one of them. And, they know the tropes that are being propagated about them are false. And when you get a fundraising letter 25 times talking about rights being stolen away and gay children hiding from their parents, you're like, it's like, okay, already. Like, I don't believe it. And it doesn't matter how many times you email me. I know you're just, rage farming is the word that comes to mind. You're pressing this button, trying to get me mad. And if you push it one too many times, there's some people, I was talking to someone today, it was just like, it's just white noise for me now. It's so transparent that that's all they're doing is trying to raise funds, and has nothing to do with parents or kids anymore. It's just about it's just about politics, plain and simple, and fundraising. So yeah, so we're seeing that as well, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the abortion issue. Like it feels like it's completely a political football every time since forever. And I'm just finishing up this book about the origin of women's shelters in Canada. And a lot of it has to do with the political football that was thrown around with regards to quote unquote keeping the family together. So they didn't want to fund these shelters because their thought was, well, then all the women are going to run away from their husbands and whatnot. And that was not the case, but that was used to gain politically across Canada for decades. And this abortion one is a similar thing. And now insert trans children into the newest, football, if you will, to get people riled up about something that literally we're talking about in the first case, abused women escaping violent situations, women in precarious birthing situations who, whether they're teen moms, whether they're, just ill-equipped, whatever it is. And then it's trans, people that can't go fight for themselves in these situations. Politicians will use them for their own political gain. And it's a pattern we've seen over and over and over.
Yeah. And just quickly going back to what you were saying, Brent, I think whether the Greens pick up or not, I think for me, the question is, are people showing up to vote out Blaine Higgs or not? And not just over Policy 713, over any number of issues. He's rating the lowest in the country on all the issues people care about: homelessness, cost of living, healthcare, education. Just with this recent March poll, there'll be another one coming out soon. So I'm really interested to see what, after all the press and pushing that Steve Outhouse has done, whether it's really resonated with people or not. I guess we'll see coming up here in the next couple of weeks. But if people are showing up to vote out Blaine Higgs, I could see them not opting to vote for a third party like Green or NDP or People's Alliance. They'll show up and say, I'm going to vote for and unless you're in one of those ridings where they're the most popular. And if you look at like Kent North, for example, and so part of what I was digging in over the past week, like it was really close between Kevin Arsenault and the Liberal and one of the past runs. So it
was less close in 20. It was more like
60. But it was still pretty close, to be honest. And are people going to show up and say, yeah, I love Kevin, but we need to get rid of Higgs and vote Liberal? I don't know.
Historically speaking, that doesn't hold, only because we can look at the Elizabeth May effect, right? Where no matter who's been in power, Elizabeth May has been able to get herself elected. Or the leader of the NDP in certain places, like with Jack Layton. But I know what you mean. I guess it just depends. Like the momentum piece, though, here is like who has momentum and where. And I guess we won't know who has momentum until much later. August is probably the time when we'll be able to see where momentum is and what it's doing. But I do agree this poll is going to help us to some extent. But I've only seen Steve Outhouse pushing his techniques in the last 3 weeks. And so I don't know when this poll happened for March, or if it's already done and they're wrapping up, or if they're still doing it.
Usually there's about, I'd say 10 days lag between when they poll and when they put it out. So Narrative will be doing one as well.
If he can bring back his approval rating, that'll tell us something. Because he's certainly not as unpopular as Justin Trudeau, but he's pretty damn close.
He's pretty unpopular. I mean, with some people, it's hard to tell, I guess. And that's the other thing is the popularity doesn't matter as much as where the vote's concentrated too. So it could be, if he can get all of his people to show up and keep them in, then maybe he'll be okay. Yeah. So it's really hard to tell. Yeah. At this point, but I to your point, I will be interested to see what this next poll has, because like you say, they've been doing all did their slick infomercial ad for healthcare, the 5-minute taxpayer paid infomercial on all these changes, which Andrew Waugh dissected, I think, very effectively in the
Yes.
TJ.
Article.
Just sort of saying, yeah, they've recruited some people, but they have in no way kept up with the demand. And that's why, there's still a humongous strain, and why people are still rating it, the lowest in Canada right now. So, I mean, I think that we're going to have to watch for messaging like that, and people who want to believe that everything is fine and Blaine Higgs is great are going to eat that with a spoon. And the people who, think Blaine is the worst premier ever are going to be really skeptical, I think. And all those folks in the middle, it's just, I think it's a toss-up as to where they're going to land right now. Do they want to change, or do they want to stay on the same course that we've been on?
Yeah, we shall see. Okay, we got 20 minutes to go, so I don't want to miss out on the chance to get into some ridings. But before we do that, I also want to do something that we neglected to do last week, and that is kind of give the high five to our supporters on Patreon. So if you are trying to get a hold of us, or if you want to support us on Patreon, you can see this. This is our shameless plug. It's supposed to happen once a pod. It didn't happen last week. But the nbpolypod@gmail.com. That's the nbpolypod@gmail.com. You can get a hold of us. Patreon.com/nbpolypod if you want to support us, like Mr. Shawn Rouse does. Shawn, you're one of our first supporters out of the gate. We really appreciate your monthly support to this. But not only Shawn Rouse, we have Luke Robertson, we have Fred LaForge, we have Jackson Jones, we have Mark Brewer. Mark Brewer's on here twice, I find very interesting, but he's got kind of two different personas. Mark is the host of the New Brunswick Traveler Pod, and he had actually he messaged me last, I don't know, it was 2 weeks ago. We were talking about Tammy Scott Wallace Joe, and Mark messaged me. He's like, wait a minute, do I hear correctly that you're saying that people are saying that we shouldn't have cruise ships in St. John? And I was like, no, not quite that. I just mean there's some businesses that are very skeptical about how much support they
value they bring.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Mark Brewer is in Sicily right now. No, is it?
He's out traveling at the European countries at the moment, which he's really fun to follow. He's a really interesting guy. And he's had, Councillor Ogden on there on his podcast, and a few others. So he's definitely worth a listen if you guys are looking for New Brunswick-based
travel
podcasters.
Intelligence. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, okay. That's our shameless plug. Give us a follow. Give us a support on Patreon. You can give us $5 a month. You can give us $35 a month, or
no bucks a month. You can just come on there and see what we're doing.
And just give us a message. Give us a like. We love you. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you want to jump into first, Shawn, for a riding that we're looking at?
So you want to pause it for a second? I'll bring it up.
Sure. All right, back in here now, and just wanted to give a shout out. If you are ever wanting to see some of this and you're listening and you're like, oh, I want to go see what they're looking at, you can find us on YouTube on Rogers TV. Rogers TV has a channel on there. So if you're not watching Channel 10, where Rogers TV airs us at 9 o'clock on Mondays, is it, Joe? Why am I blanking on that?
Yes, but also throughout the week. So it's not just...
There's some repeat scenarios. They put us in at the 2 o'clock scenario when they know there's no mutants awake even watching anything. But but yes, you can find us on YouTube, because Shawn has put together an excellent map here if you want to see it. Over to you, Shawn.
Oh, thanks. So one thing I was struggling with, again, myself, was just I'm a visual person. I need to sort of see all the information laid out, and it's like, who are the candidates, where are they running, what are the records, and just have it in a way that was easy to access. And then figuring we were going to be talking about them on the pod, I did try to do something visual here as well. So Elections New Brunswick actually makes the technical files for the new ridings available on their website. If you search for them, they're pretty easy to find, and there are free and subscriber-based mapping tools out there that will let you just import those files and make your own maps. So I was experimenting with MapHub is the one I used, and I found it like the easiest and most flexible for these purposes. So this is our updated map. So everything that's red would have a Liberal incumbent. Everything that is blue would have a PC incumbent, and of course green is the same. The yellow is where there is no incumbent, and some of these are new ridings. Some of these are the ridings where we've had, as we talked about earlier, the MLAs walk away and decide they're no longer going to run, and there's sort of an open field there. So they're definitely ones to watch. There's 11 that we know of. There was a question mark around St. John East whether Glen Savoy was going to run or not. Now, I guess the rumor is there's already been a nomination, although if there was, it's been very quiet. No one's been talking about it. No pictures are posted online. No announcement was made. And it was back in February, I guess, mid-February. It was when I'm told. I haven't been able to confirm it with anyone yet. So
yeah, I heard the same rumor. So that's that, but still not, like you say, there's no physical evidence.
Right.
Yeah.
So if Glenn wasn't running and just hasn't announced yet, there'd be 12 ridings with no incumbent, but everyone's pretty sure he's running. So let's focus in on, we're going to talk about Fredericton. So I'll zoom in here.
Fredericton
So,
North.
Oh, cool.
Fredericton North. So this District 41, there's 49 districts. They're all numbered too. And the more I've worked with the data, the easier I find it is to refer to them by number as well. So you'll see those riding numbers all throughout the Elections New Brunswick data, and in all the election results, it's referred to by numbers. All the candidates are referred to by riding number as well. So this one's riding 41, Fredericton North, and there's 4 candidates there. So the first one is Luke Randall for the Liberals, and Luke was actually the Green candidate, I believe, in the last election, and did fairly well. So just to click through on the last election in this riding,
he got 31% of the vote. So
right.
Jill Green got 41% of the vote. And in I've got it all here too. So in 2018, Steve Horseman, who finished 3rd place, a distant 3rd place behind Luke, in the last election for Fredericton North, was the incumbent. So in 2018, the Liberals won this under Steve Horseman. Steve Horseman, 2 years later, runs and falls. Also, so does Jill Green, but Jill Green lost a close race there. And Tamara White was the Green candidate with 17% of the vote in 18. So it's interesting to see how that riding's turned out, and the Liberals have fallen to 3rd. It's will Luke kind of keep that Green Party support that David Coon's built up around Fredericton that got him to 31? Will he just add up Steve Horseman's vote and his vote to get to over 50% in a big win? Or will Jill Green hold on? Like, it's so hard. Jill Green's had some complications with her health, but as far as we know, she's still running.
Yeah, she says she's running, so
yeah,
we fully expect her to run.
Yeah, and Steve Horseman is moving over to Oromocto, I believe.
That's right, Oromocto Sunbury. No, yes. Oromocto, sorry. Is it Sunbury? I can't remember.
I know.
That's one of them, right. For
we
sure.
Have so much
I think the old name was... No, the new name is Oromocto Sunbury, and the old name was Oromocto Lincoln Fredericton.
Yeah. So we have a former Green who has gone over to the Liberals. We have Jill Green, who has been the head of the housing file, social development, I believe, at one point.
Yes,
it is now.
She's had some really big files, and it depends on who you ask about how she's handled them. But I think she's always kind of had a pretty patient demeanor around some of this stuff and the criticism that she's faced.
Mhm.
I've not known her to be very volatile or, very, very transparent on sort of choosing sides. She was not one of the supporters of 713, or she
That's
is one of
right.
the, like,
So,
I guess I should define supporter.
right. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, I think that she was not one of the six. Like she sided with Higgs.
She was not one of the six, but what she did, and Arlene Dunn did the same thing, was they didn't show up for work that day. So instead of voting against the government, they decided to not attend the legislature, knowing what was going to happen with that motion, and so they avoided I guess, the bad optics of having to openly rebel against Higgs. So you can say what you want about that. It's kind of, could have used their support on that day, stick up for the kids, of course, but they did have enough people to get the job done and refer the Policy 713 to the Child and Youth Advocate. So yeah, it had the ending it was going to have regardless. But yeah, I mean, but Jill is, she's an intelligent, very charismatic MLA, I think. I think she's an engineer by trade, if memory
Yes,
serves.
she is.
So just, very well educated, well spoken, and I think she does a good job. She's no shrinking violet when she's uh, under withering attacks from the opposition. She pops right up. She knows her file inside out. So she's definitely a good representative for both Higgs and the office. And I think, she's, if you're, I don't want to presuppose, but, if you're used to working with a bunch of engineers, you might just, have some thick skin, and maybe you don't mind working with Blaine Higgs. Maybe you can, you can tolerate him a little more than maybe Arlene Dunn could, for example. I don't know.
Yeah,
A
she's a
lot of
hard one to
people.
know in some ways. Like
Mm,
a little bit more of a mystery to me than some of the others on sort of where she stands on certain files.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of people saying there's no excuse for standing by Higgs now, and I honestly I respect that opinion a lot. I think there's the people who have taken a stand deserve a lot of credit, and the ones who haven't, are you really okay with it, I guess? And as
Mhm.
Yeah.
we go further on, when she announced she was going to run again, she said she wants to stand up for the progressive wing of the party. Well, if you look at what's happening, the progressive wing of the party is getting squished daily
Yeah.
by Higgs, and you can see that with the
Yep.
AGM that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if Higgs is reelected, there's not going to be a progressive wing in that party for her to find a home in. So she basically has to stay on the right side of Higgs and try her best to support the progressive issues. I don't know.
I
It's
think,
it's
see,
going
I
to
look
be
at
Yeah.
interesting.
Fredericton North, and I think it's like every capital region is in this country. I don't think it's that different. It's far more white collar. It's far more progressive. It's far more educated. And so
Hmm.
I think Jill Green got elected under that progressive version of that banner for the Conservatives. So, I mean, it's the big piece here is Althea for the Greens. We can't take out the David Coon impact here in Fredericton. He got Jenica Atwin elected.
Hmm.
Now, Jenica Atwin got herself reelected under the Liberal banner with the help of, you know, the Justin Trudeau piece, as well as um, even MP Wayne Long, did some campaigning with her
Dominic,
up there, and Dominic. Um, so it it's hard to say here if Althea with the Greens doesn't hold on to that 15 to 20% of the vote, because if she does, then it was 2018 when the People's Alliance got 15% of the vote here. In 2018, they beat the Greens in vote turnout. And so it's like, okay, what does that say about this riding? It could be
Mm,
more libertarian than we think. It could be more anti-government than we think. I don't know. I just don't buy it. And so I wonder if Jill losing a pretty significant piece of the puzzle here. Yeah, it
And
is
like
going
you
to
say,
be one to
Shawn, like
watch.
is this a throw out Higgs election where Jill will be a casualty of that
Yeah,
sort of,
It's I think it's one of those ones to watch for sure. Just where, like I said, Luke is, you've got a group of candidates, definitely. I'll go back here to that, Jill and Luke both have run before.
Yep.
Anthea is known in the community, maybe not as well. I think
Yep.
that's probably something she's going to struggle with. I don't know Glenn Davis. I do see there is a history, not in the last election, but there is a history of the People's Alliance doing okay in that riding as well. So I guess that's an open question for the People's Alliance altogether for this election has Higgs swung far enough to the right to get those votes back? And is there, to the right of Higgs, there's not a lot of room anymore, I wouldn't think. So if you're to the right of Higgs, you're pretty far right. So I don't know.
And I wonder how much of the PANB folks are bitter about the Chris Austin, Michelle Conroy, defection.
I can't see it. I know what you're saying, but I cannot see there being enough animosity toward, Chris Austin and Michelle Conroy crossing the floor. That party has its, history. It's interesting, but those people that kind of grievance of they, cross the floor. That doesn't tend to, I've never seen it tend to surface in any material way for an election. Where
I found if you guys want some fun, is a deep dive on the People's Alliance Facebook. Yeah, it's very fascinating to check out what they're sort of talking about. They have some fairly good engagement around some of these things, and I found it quite interesting to read. Sort of, there's Glenn Davis right there. Yeah, wrote knocking on doors, collecting signatures back in March. So, they're trying to rebuild again. And I always just find this stuff so interesting to see how they feel, how they're strategizing to do it. So, for all you folks out there, take a peek at their Facebook because they are pretty active on there trying to, 57 comments on Glenn Davis's, go
post,
knock on doors post here. Yeah.
That's good for Facebook.
So, yeah, I know. I think that's where the PANB might have the most traction, to be honest. So
they're probably doing better than the NDP. Just sorry, Alex White, but NDP is barely on the map in any of the polls, and I think PANB was 2% the last poll. So I mean, they're there. Was it? I'm going from memory, but
I think you might be thinking of the People's Party of Canada was at 2%. But I thought the PANB was more it actually surprised me when I saw it. I was like, what the heck? I'm pretty sure it was 9%.
Really? Okay, I must be misremembering then. I'll look that up.
I agree. We can fact check that. But I remember watching that, looking at that narrative research poll and being like, there's no way there's 9% of the population still voting for the People's Alliance. But
I can't see it. Like I said, I don't think there's a lot of room to the right of Higgs, and it's kind of like if you're a Pox in both their houses. I mean, why wouldn't you just vote Green? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we just have a minute left here. Yeah,
I know we got to wrap it. Man, it's just such a fun little map to look at, and we got to get next week. We'll try to block off the whole hour,
the whole time,
candidates, because we only gave ourselves. We got carried away with the federal provincial overlap piece, which was very interesting.
It was, it was a good chat.
But let's try to do this again next week. Shawn, are you still?
Yeah, count me in.
Still game.
All right.
Yep,
we haven't scared you away yet.
No.
Unlike conservative guests we've been trying to have on here.
Yeah, if there's any conservatives out there, please come on. We'll hang out too.
It'd be so fun to have a conservative on to join this, round out this discussion, actually. So
agreed.
All right, gang.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 1 week, and feel free to get at us again on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Joanna. See you all there.
Thanks.